Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second 75th Anniversary Virtual Summit, International Education Today Sustaining Success, in honor of NAFSA's 75th anniversary. My name is Dale LaFleur, and I'm the Senior Director for Academic Affairs and Internationalization at NAFSA, and I will be moderating today's discussion. As a reminder, this event will be recorded and a link will be shared after the event. Today's discussion will focus on international education today, which defines our path forward. In the US, we recognize the need to address challenges related to policies and strategies, both locally and nationally, and likely the same is true globally. Sustaining success requires a multifaceted approach and time. This panel of experts at the live virtual summit will discuss how international educators can support the long-term health of the field and the many communities that benefit from this work. Joining me today are longstanding professionals in the field of international education. Ahmad Ezzedine, the Vice President for Academic Student Affairs and Global Engagement at Wayne State University, and NAFSA Vice President for Scholarship and Institutional Strategy, will start us off with framing remarks. He will be joined by Elena Anderson, the Director of Talent and Culture at CET Academic Programs, Mihaela Matianu, Assistant Provost for Global Engagement at Florida Atlantic University, and Paulo Zagallo Melo, Associate Provost for Global Education at Western Michigan University. You can read more about our panelists online, and please see the link to their bios in our chat. To begin, I would like to hand it over to Ahmad, who will offer some framing remarks, and then each of the panelists will provide their opening statements. Ahmad?
Thank you, Dale, and welcome, friends and colleagues. It is good to be with you. I bring you greetings on behalf of our colleagues on the NAFSA board. We're so glad that you have joined us as we continue to celebrate NAFSA's 75th anniversary and its legacy of innovation, education, and advocacy for international education. We all know that international education advances learning and scholarship, builds understanding and respect among different people, and enhances constructive leadership in the global community. And I'm sure I'm speaking for all of us at NAFSA that we strongly believe that international education is fundamental to fostering peace, security, and well-being. As I was reflecting on the theme of today's summit, I was thinking of a word that encapsulates and describes what international education is, particularly at this point in time. And what I came up with is resilience. This is a theme that's continuing from our conference. I think as a field, as a group of professionals, we have proven time and time again that we are very resilient, and that has been and continues to be the key to our success. We look at the last couple of decades. I'm sure we can look farther also. But in the last decades, we have managed through so many crises and changes, being political, natural disasters, technological changes, health-related events, and the list goes on. And through every episode, we have maneuvered and managed to emerge successfully, equipped with better tools, expanded networks, and a stronger case for the importance and need for higher education. And we've had, of course, a few bruises along the way. But how did we do that? And what are the elements that contribute to this resilience and success? There are quite a few. For me, it is a handful that I will go over now and we'll discuss today. It's being able to work with, adapt to, and manage change effectively. What some of my colleagues have heard me say is managing and operating in the gray. This is always a work in progress, and we can always do better, but we have to be flexible, and that's really has been key to our success. It is about being the diplomats that we are and should be in our positions. It is about understanding the business side of our work and how does it manifest itself in our institutions and our organizations that we work with. It is about being part of a network on which you can lean and to which you can contribute. And finally, it's about taking care of yourself and your people, the people around you. That's what we will explore today. And we have a tested, successful, and innovative group of colleagues who will share with us their perspective on success in international education and what it means to them and their careers. We hope to also hear from you and have the dialogue with you during this session. Thank you for your participation. Looking forward to an engaging summit, and I'm going to turn it over to Elena now.
Thank you, Ahmad, and welcome everyone. I'm excited to be here and I'm really excited to talk about the state of international education. These are truly exciting times, but they're also precarious times. When you think about our geopolitical landscape, you know that it's more polarized and uncertain than ever. But we as international educators are different now as professionals because we are different as human beings. As we re-emerge and recalibrate from the last 3 years, we realize that we all have a new definition of success now. We realize that sometimes success means just surviving, just making it through the day, just deciding to continue to move on. And we have also learned, as Ahmad said, the hard way, unfortunately, the definition of resilience. From my vantage point as an international educator and as a fusion of a human resources professional, I have seen the tough business decisions and personal sacrifice that it took to get us to this place. We have had to pivot more times in the last 3 years than we can really recall. But not only have we learned more innovative ways to solve problems and to bring solutions, we have learned the true definition of resilience. However, it has left us with some scars and bruises as we've returned to our teams, or sometimes starting new teams with fewer colleagues to share the workload. We miss some of our fellow international educators who were downsized in the field, some of whom are still seeking employment to this day. And if we are personally seeking growth opportunities, we are limited because our organizational budgets are very tight. So what do we do now? What do we do now that we are still fatigued? We're still sleep deprived if we try to stay on top of things. We're trying to stay motivated. And we are still enjoying what it means to go back to normal. We are starting to travel again for work, do our site visits, see our colleagues again who have been remote and distant. We are welcoming new students to our campuses and in our institutions. And we do a lot of things that we used to do before this global health crisis. However, things and processes and budgets and costs keep changing. We keep having to pivot. We keep having to adjust. So I don't want to drag us down with this mood, but as we talk about sustaining success today, we have to talk about the price of what that success was. We are successful in spite of those sacrifices, those bruises, those hardships and setbacks that we have experienced. We continue to push forward whenever and wherever we can. We have continued to speak up on the importance of global education, as well as the importance of being inclusive and welcoming, as well as socially just. So we look at our success today in the field of international education, knowing that as professionals, we have an even stronger passion and a sharper focus on why we do what we do. To quote Simon Sinek, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So as we look back over our progress within the last 3 years, and especially over the last 75 years, we have made a remarkable journey towards our collective why. Therefore, I'm so excited about the state of international education today. We have made this an opportunity of our lifetime. And we are so well equipped to show the world our value as global citizens who have the knowledge, skills, and the hearts to reconnect this disconnected world. So I would say that I believe that the key to sustaining our success is the ability to sustain ourselves as well as each other. I now turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Mahila, for her take on our field.
Thank you, Elena, and hello, everybody. Thank you for joining our session today, and thank you to my colleagues for inviting me to be on this panel. The definition of success, that could take a long time today, but I'll try to be brief. And I'll try to start by saying that early in your career, when you try to find your professional path, some may tell you that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I hope that I don't disappoint you if I say that, in fact, If you do what you love, you will work harder, you will work longer, smarter, and you will be willing to stay the course and fight through the challenging times. The key to sustained success for me is to fully commit to my professional growth and the growth of those around me, development for yourself. And if you do have the opportunity to lead others, for the team that you lead, and really becoming a lifelong learner and practitioner in your chosen area. For me, that has happened through professional affiliations, developing the knowledge base beyond the immediate area of our responsibility, building and developing other professionals, and maintaining integrity and core professional values. And first, I do want to talk about NAFSA as a key to my sustained success. And that's not because they sponsored the event, but that's because as a newly arrived immigrant of college age, I knew that working in the social sciences and the university setting was something that I wanted to pursue, but that was about it. So one day when I was an undergrad at the University of Miami, I heard my full-time colleagues talk about this conference that they're all going to in Miami that year. And I knew that's something that I wanted to do professionally down the road. And when I went to my first NAFSA conference in Vancouver, Canada, I was totally starstruck. The real stars for me were the experts who were presenting workshops and had big ideas and big vision. At that time, I worked for an institution that had limited professional development resources, but they were there and I took advantage of them to the best of my ability. Later on, I got more involved with NAFSA, and through those commitments and opportunities, 2 decades later, I still work with many of the colleagues that I met at that time. We share ideas, successes, challenges, and then we support each other at various stages of our professional careers. And I would be remiss in not mentioning that actually those of us who are here doing this today in international education, we are definitely in a position of privilege because we were able to transgress the challenges of the last few years and come out of it in many cases better than we were before. This leads me to my next point, which is developing your internal and external networks. This network honestly kept me sane and kept me going and sustaining myself through some of the more challenging times, whether there were COVID restrictions, the political ebbs and flows, travel bans, CBIS recertification, you name it. The sustained long-term success came with many, many challenges along the way. But with the help of my colleagues and my professional connections, I think I was able to get through those things. Finally, sustained success is not an individual process. We work within teams, and then we have to accept that a significant portion of our time has to be dedicated to nurturing those team relationships, whether they're with peers, whether they're with people that we supervise or people that supervise us. It's really important to take the time in building those cohesive relationships. And finally, it's also very important to me, and I'm sure to many of us in our field, is that being a successful professional, a thought leader, or an expert in your field also comes with a lot of responsibility and the need to remain with a lot of integrity, adhering to our core professional values and principles, being inclusive and supporting those who may be going through other challenges. Sustained success for me and genuine success that produces results, but that also feels right in your gut, is the only way for me to process the ideas of sustained success. And now I would like to turn it over to my colleague Paolo, who will give us his thoughts.
Thank you, Mihaela. Hello, everyone. Always good to be here with our international education family. I see many friends on the panel, friends here on the chat. Always glad to join you. So I was prompted to think about what international education is today. International education is a noble, successful, educational, and economic global activity. We should always remind ourselves that ultimately we are in the peacekeeping business. Our work contributes to preempt, contain, and mediate conflict. And we are a significant portion of global soft power. In this regard, international education is a noble activity. It aims at enhancing humanity in international and cross-cultural relations. This is what the professionals of international education do. This is what we do. And this should always and forever be our primary motivation, our mission, the mission of our professional networks. On educational success, international education has a highly successful track record of creating and improving educational opportunities. In international education, we have mirrored entire curricula. We have developed institutional research connections and personal collaborations leading to creativity, innovation, and to social, political, and economic advancement all over the world. Often, these successful collaborations involve significantly different cultures, and often our institutions sustained and were able to sustain them during during hours of conflict and drastic natural disasters. We have sustained the most incredible programs during very difficult times. We have shown that humanity prevails when we sustain structures and programs that were built on the premises of humanity. The premise that kindness is global, that love is global, that no matter where we are, we want our children and loved ones to be healthy and happy. We pursue the same type of opportunities for our next generations. In what regards economic success, international education is a highly successful economic activity. In 1950, there were about 30,000 international students in the US. 10 years later, the number had risen by 78%. At the beginning of each of the following 2 decades, international enrollment in the US the growth was measured in 3-digit numbers. 172% growth by 1970, 116% growth by 1980. And since 1980, international enrollment in the US grew consistently at around 30% during each 10-year period. I do not think there are many economic activities in the US, for instance, that could match these numbers, which is particularly impressive if we remind ourselves that we are talking about an educational activity, often underrated when it comes to economic impact. In its global aspect, while the US and the UK led the way in the initial decades of international education, more recently, we have seen a steady globalization of international education. For example, the number of international students in OECD countries increased by 70% between 2010 and 2020. Countries like Australia, Canada, China, France, Germany, and Russia all reaching 6-figure international enrollment numbers in recent years. It is estimated that by 2030, 9 million students will travel to study outside of their home educational system. We represent a long-standing, successful global activity. If this success is so well established, why are we focusing on the concept of success at the celebration of NAFSA's 75th anniversary? After all, NAFSA has been here since the beginning. It has been an important observer and generator of the success of international education. I believe we are focusing on success because the sustainability of international education relies on an equally amazing and flawed concept: human behavior, individual and collective political human behavior. We humans have been able to imagine, create, develop, and for the most part, sustain the structures that have secured the success story of international education. However, the success of international education is a mission. It is not a destination. We, the present professionals of international education, must procure sustainable, structured success routes for international education. This search for sustainable success is why topics such as strategic budgeting in internationalization have taken off in recent years, because we have understood the need to strategize using structural approaches based on sustained funding sources. Sustainable success is also why we have and should continue to put international education advocacy at the forefront of our professional dedication and commitment. NAFSA's role in advocacy has been exemplary, but we should keep in mind that associational work is done by people, not by an institutional brand name or logo. Lastly, as I end my remarks, I'd like to encourage international education professionals watching this event to occasionally pause to recognize the outcomes of our work. Over the last few months, years, decades, you have certainly achieved, improved, adjusted, reorganized, and changed international education. You have changed together with your institution, changed with your country, and definitely changed with the world. You are part of the success story of international education. To a large extent, success relies in you believing how important you and your institutions are to this success story. I say this perfectly aware of how difficult it is to keep this epic vision in mind at all times. But at least, let's keep it in our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulo, and to all of our panelists. I really appreciate all your insights and words of wisdom. As our panelists are coming back online and we prepare for our panel discussion, I would like to poll the audience. I think the poll has popped up on your screen. And the first question that I want to ask you is, what is your primary competency for sustaining success? And as many of you know, NAFSA has launched our International Education Competencies 2.0 product, and these are 4 of the competencies that you can learn more about through that product. But please go ahead and take this panel, and then we'll look at our overall results. Okay. So when we see the votes coming in, maybe once they're about done, you can show the results back up on our screen. And not surprisingly, relationship cultivation is the strongest competency that you have indicated that you focus on for sustaining success. And I think that came out in some of the comments that we've already heard from our panelists, and we'll probably hear more about that as we go through our discussion today. So thank you all for answering that question. What I'd like to do now is open the panel conversation. I have some questions that I will ask of our panelists. And in the meantime, if you have questions for our panelists, please put them in the Q&A button, which is on your Zoom panel towards the bottom. And I'll be reviewing the questions as they come in as well. But I'd like to start, and maybe I'll start with you, Elena, with the first question. How has your definition of success changed over time? And how has the field of international education and your role in it changed over time? And we'll start with Elena.
Thank you, Del. I want to acknowledge that I allowed myself to change the definition of success, which is something my personality type has been slow to do. One of those things is success is similar. I compare it to a long journey, a journey where you have to pick up your tools and your supplies along the way. And it's not necessarily about the destination. There's a quote, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And success is truly about enduring this journey, enduring it with companions to support you along the way, but also enduring it through continuing to learning as you go. And every skill that you pick up is something that will support you with the other leg of your journey. Another thing with going throughout my career, I have had an untraditional path as an international educator. In fact, I may have started my journey on a campus at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, but I was at a think tank for a majority of my career. I've served time as an entrepreneur, and then I'm back on the provider side. So even each step of the way, each city that I've lived in, there was a NAFSA. And this is a plug as well as a testimonial. There was a NAFSA to guide me, to support me, to be that bridge, and really validate what I had to offer to the new opportunity. So I'm so grateful for being able to continue the journey, but I also allowed myself, in looking at success, allow that evolution to happen. And so when you have a very firm view of success, you have this view of reaching a pinnacle, being at the top, receiving a certain title, a certain reward. But if you allow the evolution to happen, many more doors will be open and you will reach distances you did not have a vision for yourself. So I'm very grateful for allowing my definition of success to change. It doesn't mean that I want to be mediocre. It still means that I'm pursuing excellence, but it means that I'm allowing my vision to shift along the way.
Thank you, Elena. I think that's an important message, that to embrace change and to really think about success as it makes sense at that point in your life and in your career. I think that's very important. Ahmad, I'm wondering if you can share your insights about your definition of success and how that may have changed over time.
Yes, I think it echoes what Elena talked about. It's about the evolution of what is important at different levels of my career, what was important at the time and what is important. There is, I think, the common thread that continues today is the constant need for learning and building your network. And I mean, that doesn't stop. I think it's just being open to taking the doors that are in front of you, maybe exploring those. And that has, for me, that has proven very important over the years and has given me a lot of opportunities that I would not have considered if I set my mind, this is what I'm going to do. So sometimes this experimentation, this exploring, again, which is related to what we do in international education, is very important. The other thing that I was intrigued by the poll results about the business acumen. I think that has been a key component of my success, particularly as I advanced in my career. It becomes more important than sometimes some of the other elements, not more important, but more pressing, because you're going to be expected. Unfortunately, we are in a business. We are in a business context. We're operating in a business context, and we have to be able to manage through that and find the resources and create the resources sometimes. That's, I encourage people to build that business acumen as they work in whatever role they are. Just look at what are those opportunities to develop that competence.
I think that's important. And, the competencies, as we created them and they evolved, I think there was a recognition that at some level we utilize these competencies differently depending on which role we're in, which position in, what stage of our career we're in. So it really flows nicely with what you were saying, that this competency has become more important for you now. It might have been a different competency earlier at different stages of your career. Mahaila, what are your perspectives?
Okay, now you can hear me. Sorry about that. Speaking of the 4 competencies, it's difficult to really pick one I think that business acumen is extremely important, but it only works in the context of the other three. And one of the things that I've learned along the way, personally and with people around me, is that we can acquire business acumen. We all have different strengths. You know, some of us are more analytical, some of us are more on the maybe humanities side. We all have different strengths and they all help in our business acumen. But if we don't develop the other three, then the business acumen kind of goes on the wayside. So in terms of how success has changed over time, I mean, it really can change from day to day. It's not, you know, some days, as Elena was mentioning earlier, it can be just getting through the day. Other days, it's just you rock it and you have your numbers are glorious and, you know, you write your reports and you should feel okay to just celebrate that and feel proud of yourself when that happens as well. You know, when I started out in my career, and I've always been in higher ed, international higher ed for the most part, I was really focused on just being really good at what I did and developing my knowledge base. Then I did, you know, start to work more on developing relationships. And I also learned that sometimes success means being behind the scenes and either influencing or supporting or just being okay to not take any of the credit. And that's success because your project or whatever your goal is still getting accomplished. You know, not everything is second knowledge and second nature. And I would say that for me, learning how to balance my desire to just keep going and achieve that goal with stopping and enjoying the moments along the way has been something that has changed over time. And another thing that I think is important to know is that success also comes from the ability to see the big picture, but also understanding systems and having, while you're the SIO, really having empathy and support those who are in the trenches, basically getting, you know, helping you build that vision and getting through the day, you know, with the million processes that they have to go through. We sometimes forget how time consuming those are, and we have to step back and listen when our teammates are saying, listen, what do you want me to do first today? This, or that. We can't do everything at once. So I'll stop there because I know that there probably Paulo wants to add a few things. But thank you for including me in this question.
Paulo.
Thank you. Well, I think the change in my understanding of success in our activity, in my work, went from is directly related with skills, because my background is actually accounting, management, financial management. So I kind of did not worry too much about that when I started. I was focusing, or not didn't focus about it. I should say didn't worry, but didn't focus on it because that was kind of my background. You know, I got that under control kind of attitude. That's not my focus. My focus were ideas. What can we do differently? How can we innovate? How can we change? And the change in the concept of success over time in my work is really connected with going from ideas to enduring success, to enduring structured approaches, to understanding that limited, if we create great programs that are very limited in terms of their duration, that also create some institutional motivation issues. So people are not as motivated if they see that, oh, there was this great program, but we ran it for 1 year or 2 years and now it's gone. So I started focusing on really structured approaches, programs that are relying on a structure, on sustainable funding, much more difficult to create. They probably take a lot longer to create and establish, or they can take a lot longer, but they also last longer, and ultimately they stay and they're more important than just one person or two people working on that. The other thing that changed in my notion of success in my work was acknowledging that people's positive energy is not only a scarce resource, but it is also fragile and bouncy and finite. That you have to really work on keeping that positive energy for others. That one of our main jobs is to reactivate, sometimes daily, other people's positive energy, creativity, dedication. That is our job. That we cannot just think that someone who starts that way working with us is going to always feel that way. And if they don't, it is our role to step in and pull them up and support them to going back to be their best selves. That's something that changed over time. These things are never evident in your first day on the job. There's no textbook that teaches you these things.
I agree, and it sort of goes back to what Elena started in her opening statement, right? About all the bumps and bruises that we experience over time, and how to rejuvenate ourselves and the people that are around us, and keep moving forward, right? So I agree that that's really something that isn't taught, and we learn along the way, and sometimes it's something that impacts us from other people who might help us keep going and get up again when we feel like we get knocked down. So I'm going to turn to the next question. And I think what I'll do, Mihaela, is start with you on this next question. Success does not happen in isolation. So please share some insights on key partners or people that have helped you along the way.
Well, I've already talked about NAFSA and how much I personally and professionally gained from it, and how to this day I have a core group of people and maybe an extended network of colleagues that I can rely on for advice, for support, for information, morale building, whatever is needed at different times, both formally and informally, I would have to say. Another example that I have is the AIEA peer circle. Some of you may have been part of that. That was a great project and a good way for some of us to connect really during some of the most difficult times, which was, of course, during the pandemic. And sometimes if you're the senior international officer, you're the only person at your institution who wears that hat. And you can't always talk to your colleagues or people that report to you about some problems. You can't always bug your supervisor or your VP or your president with your problems. So having a group of peers that share, similar challenges is really, really important. But also for me, for a long time, it has been my team here at the Center for Global Engagement. And before that, when I was overseeing international services, for me, they're a source of inspiration. You can learn from people that are brand new in the field, even if it is, how to use Adobe Pro or whatever it is, that you can learn from everybody in your office. And I'm so proud of them, and I'm so happy that they choose to spend their day with us here at the center. I also think it's important to read and to become informed outside of your field of expertise, whether it's politics or, anything on social issues or something that's not even closely related, to kind of broaden your view and then step outside of your comfort zone in the way. I mean, we're in our own sort of universe sometimes where we're in universities, in institutions that, value a certain way of thinking, perhaps. And when you step outside, you see that not everybody thinks that way. So I think it's important to create those connections as well. They help you to understand your commitment, to recommit, and also to really be even a better advocate along the way.
Thank you. Ahmad, would you like to share next?
Sure. Again, it's relationships that I've developed and cultivated over the years. There is in international education, there is a great network that I have, and I have a few trusted friends who are on speed dial and whom I call on, and they call on me too. And on a regular basis. I have a couple of mentors that I rely on. I mean, on my drive to work every day. Sometimes every week I call one of them just to chat and kind of sometimes vent, sometimes ask for advice, sometimes listen to them. So I think it's the reciprocity here is important. Building that developing those connections and being there for your colleagues as well, and for the people you work with. That's really a key. And I think you need to disconnect. So to Mahila's point, finding some people also outside of international education. So because sometimes we're too much close into this. Well, we need to kind of disconnect a little bit and not do work-related work, not talk about that. And that's also has been helpful to me. And I'd say I've something that I've especially recently, it's just like, I'm sure if I ask everybody, raise your hand, who feels at times burnt out or like overwhelmed, I'm sure we get a lot of hands probably lifted, and just like not feel guilty about if you take work home, not doing anything about it, it's not the end of the world. It'll be there on Monday morning, and so you'll tackle it Monday morning. So I've learned not to feel guilty about not working if I didn't, if I couldn't or didn't want to. So that's something that also has been helpful for me.
I do think both of you have said something really important, which is to have that sounding board, have those peers that your go-to people. Maybe, keeping it professional and not bringing it home is also important. Not bringing it home to your family or your partner is also important. Elena, would you like to share your comments?
Yes, absolutely. I can agree that the support system that international educators offer is matched to none. They are really supportive no matter which stage of your career you're in. I have been in Mahila's position and being the only international educator at my institution, and it's so isolating, but it's great to go back to your supportive ecosystem, your home base, whether it's a conference or even a state session, to get renewed and to just feel like you're not alone. However, that isolation actually forced me to sharpen my business acumen, my communication skill, because I still had to adapt and adjust my messaging across disciplines. I still had to communicate with accountants and economists and other business professionals about what I did and why I do it, and that passion still resonated. So from a position of being isolated, thanks to the network for supporting me, where I can go back to that situation, not as someone who felt isolated and othered, but someone who was an ambassador for the field, who even inspired others to also embrace my approach to work and approach to being connected and embracing exchanges. So it's a powerful relationship that we have with one another as international educators, where even those who are outside of the field find us inspirational and really can join us in our common causes.
Yeah, I agree. And Paulo, I invite you to join this conversation.
Thank you. The role of professional and peer networks can never be underestimated. Peer mentoring, our own, in whatever label whatever wonderful institutional labels we have for what most of the time, or at least some of the time, are therapy groups for dealing with our professional challenges on a day-to-day basis. talking to people who do the same thing we do at other places and are going through the same problems and the same frustrations and so forth. When it comes to professional networks, I always think that it's kind of like loving your children, because we have many and they're all important. NAFSA, the Association of International Education Administrators, AIEA, APLU has initiatives in internationalization, EAIE, the European counterpart, API, the Asia Pacific counterpart, also because at the end of the day, international education is global. And there are these peer networks are a little bit everywhere. Just because you have to care more about one child at some point doesn't mean that loving your children is a zero-sum game. Doesn't mean that you love the other child less in that moment. So it's the same thing when you are motivated to work with associations that can serve as venues for enhancing your professional development and work. There are many that can serve your goals in different ways. For instance, and at different levels, even different levels in terms of the professional work that you do or position that you have at your institution, the region you're in. I mean, NAFSA's regional groups are of an incredible benefit for international offices all over the United States. I mean, it's just make sure that you know them, know what they do, and engage with them. Because as I mentioned before, people make institutions. If you love NAFSA, it's because the people who work for NAFSA and have worked for NAFSA worked for NAFSA along these 75 years, dedicated their time and their passion and to NAFSA. The same thing with the other organizations, the AIA, etc. I mean, these are people. These might be brand names in our field nowadays, but they're still people. If we stop caring, these organizations will stop being useful to all of us. So we need to care and we need to engage for our own good.
I think that's a really important message that many of these associations that you've all referred to, I mean, we rely on engagement with you as people in the field, as volunteer leaders, as members, as participants in various events like this one, or conferences, or other things. So there's actually a symbiotic relationship that happens with the professionals in the field and the associations that serve them. And there's definitely an awareness by all of us that we need to continue working together to achieve our long-term goals and sustain success over time. There's another poll that I would like to launch to the audience, and we're going to talk about challenges next. So you'll see it pop up in your screen. What is your primary challenge? And there's some options there. So if you take a moment to respond to that poll, and then we'll take a look at your top primary challenges. And as soon as you see the polling slow down, please post the results. And I know sometimes it's hard to choose just one, but we are asking you to choose your primary challenge, not all of them. So we're forcing you to make a decision. If not, we were afraid you might choose all of them. Okay, let's see the results. Okay. So we can see, it looks like staffing shortages or burnout is slightly ahead of insufficient financial resources, followed by enrollment, and then lack of top leadership support. So I think we understand where many of you are coming from. We certainly will have some conversations here about many of these challenges that you're all indicating you're facing. So let me switch back to our panel And let's talk about a setback or a burnout, a time where you felt burned out and how you reset after this experience. And Paulo, let's start with you.
I'm not even surprised with the result of the poll. I'm right there with you. I'm right there with all of you. It's financial resources, obviously resources in general, because staffing, staff is also resource. Human resources are important. They're everything. They're the basis for making things happen. I'm curious, I wonder if we had done this poll 3 years ago, 4 years ago, if staffing would have ranked, staffing issues and burnout would have ranked that high. Probably not on my world back then, but now definitely. I mean, and I think it's making us change the way we think about how we organize work with our teams, the way we plan work with our teams. It certainly has affected and the way we work with my team, and the way we have planned hiring, the way we have planned implementation of ideas. It changed a lot. I think it changed more than, I think if we give us a couple more years, we'll see even more changes coming out of the impact of staffing issues and staffing shortages and burnout. Because it is real, the burnout is real. And we have to consider it in our day-to-day management and strategy, which again, to be honest, was not at the top of my concerns 4 or 5 years ago. But it is now. And so definitely enrollment, of course, it's connected with financial resources to a large extent. And that is connected to human resources. So always important. But we should always remind our institutions and the top leadership of our institutions that of the definition, the type of definition I was mentioning earlier today. We're in a very successful global business and or global activity and a noble one. Nobody created international education thinking we're going to make a lot of money here. The world created it, our institutions created it because it was a noble principle for people to exchange cultural views and understand each other towards mutual understanding. So we have to think that in the long run, this is important, and we have to remind ourselves and also remind our institutions that we're serving a higher purpose here. But yes, we have pressure. We have financial pressure every day, and that is attached to enrollment and is attached to financial models and budgeting and resources. And leadership in those areas is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. Elena, I saw your head nodding. Would you like to comment, respond to Paulo a little bit?
Yes, he really touched on a really good point, and just addressing my hybrid role of being both international ed and HR, and addressing these shortages. The reality is different now with funding, and I would say the culture of our field is the fact that we are very mission driven and not profit driven. So we have an unfortunate perfect storm of the fact that our skill set, our knowledge has been undervalued with what industries need, or even our own higher ed institutions. So there has to be intentional coaching and education of ourselves to allow us to articulate what is transferable in either space. And going back to Ahmad's reference to needing business acumen, at the end of the day, relates to a budget, and you have to make things fiscally sustainable for the organization you're part of. As an international educator, you have to articulate your value to the bottom line. And that is so counterculture for us. Like, we're Paulo said we're in a peacemaking business, but what is that ROI? What is ROI, and what does that mean with this fiscal year? And we kind of have to frame it differently for the new professionals that are joining the field. Yes, lead with your heart, but at the end of the day, make sure that you show your return on investment in that spreadsheet or in that budget line item for that particular role. And it takes time to really show that, because I see that argument happen time and time again when our colleagues are talking about there being short-staffed, that it takes so long to get a new position approved because it's not understood, or the wages are stuck in this particular job level. All that is part of educating our fellow colleagues outside of the field about what we really do and what that means. And for incoming professionals, like really being attracted to them, wages are necessary. Having fair wages at least, or at least a certain amount of flexibility in your role. So we have to kind of step back and think of this from a business perspective and how this aligns with the institutions that are funding our individual roles. But it has shifted for sure.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I know this relates to a question that has come in from the audience already about sustaining young professionals as they enter the field. So not only sustaining ourselves, our organizations, our teams, but as we bring the next generation of professionals into this career field, thinking about their journey 30 years from now, what does that look like, and how can we make sure they stay engaged? Ahmad, would you like to comment?
Yes, something I mentioned earlier, the flexibility that we have to learn and that is inherent in our roles. I think there is an opportunity for us to, as international educator, we have a lot of transferable skills to other aspects of, but if we're talking higher ed, for example, from that lens, we could do a lot of things. We have expertise, experiences where we're good at a lot of areas. So how do we help make the case for that and get involved in that, and which indirectly it helps us make the case for internationalization, because indirectly you're bringing that experience and that focus on what we do and what we know. And I think it is imperative on those of us who are in senior positions in SIOs to really help shape and help explain and help create opportunities for our teams to get involved in other aspects of university operations where their skills can play a role. I think I saw related to the question to Marty's question. I think part of that is higher ed in general is changing the role of advisors. I mean, we're so not those roles are evolving. So we don't have specialists in certain functions like we used to have before. So where does the international education professionals fit into that, and how can we make the case for that? We need to develop the pipeline, no question, particularly as a lot of those positions have been cut probably. So we need to make sure that we create enough opportunities and enough of a talent pipeline to get into the field, albeit not the way it was traditionally imagined or prescribed, but what's a new evolving role of an international education person. I think we're always going to have IS officers who are going to deal with immigration stuff, and but what else, and what else can we do, and can we be part of? How can we be part of the university operation and helping students with their journey and exploring international opportunities? What is the role of staff in that? And this will help us define what those positions look like in the future.
Absolutely. Mihaela, I invite you to enter the conversation.
Thank you. So if we can maybe connect back to the idea of setback or burnout, and perhaps I think we all have many examples, but one of my examples would be perhaps even before the pandemic. Let me say that I don't feel burned out by a lot of work. I feel burned out by, things like monovision institutional support. I mean, I'm not saying that's the situation of my institution now, but when it's all about bringing in the students and not reinvesting in bringing more or different students, or reinvesting in the team that actually works with those students. I think those things that are actually out of our control or perceived as out of our control is what burns us out the most. So there was a period of time where all that was quite overwhelming for me and my team. And at that point, I really had to step back from some of my other commitments, including some commitments with NAFSA at the time. I think it's important to know that. And it was difficult. You're not comfortable doing that. You feel like you're letting people down, like you're not rising up to the occasion. But I did have to step back and reset and say, okay, what are my priorities now? Where can I give more energy to, and where I can maybe save it for later when I'm in a different place. So I think, sometimes it's the emotional overload also can cause burnout, and then the work seems unsustainable. But I think most people, including our younger staff, our new staff, they're not afraid of a lot of work. They're just not always perhaps ready to do it without knowing what's in it for them. And I think it's a fair way to look at things. And I'm not just talking monetarily, but why am I going to commit so much time and energy and dedication? What am I getting out of it? Those transferable skills. Many of them will stay in international education. Some will find different paths. Global learning and international education are changing, have been changing for the last couple of years quite significantly. And I think helping them to see value for themselves and also what they can bring to the organization is really important. And to one of Ahmad's earlier points, it's okay to have a life outside of work. It's also okay if you really enjoy working and you don't mind spending some time on a project that you have a passion for. But yeah, it's okay to I bring my bag every day back and forth, and many nights I don't open it at all, and that's okay. Next day the work is there in my bag and on my computer. So just being okay with that. And also, if you do supervise people, give them permission to do the same, and just kind of be mindful of when you send your messages, what's the top priority. Everything cannot be urgent all the time.
I think that wellness message is really important, Mihaela, and I think we model that as leaders to our staff, to our peers, and to others by being mindful of some of those things, and making sure that we give ourselves the opportunity to recharge and reset, whatever that means for you in whatever way that works best for you. I have one more poll that we're going to put to our audience before we answer our final panel question and go to Q&A from the audience. And that question is, what is your primary resource for sustaining success? So we talked about our challenges, and now we want to talk about what is our go-to resource to make sure that we are looking towards the long-term sustainable success of our offices and our jobs and our careers and our personal lives even. And we again are asking you to choose your top choice here. And then as soon as the polling slows down, we'll show you the results of what you had to say. And I think these options actually draw very well upon some of the comments we just heard from our panelists as well. Okay, so the results show, okay, professional development. So one of the primary resources that you are telling us you use to sustain success over time is professional development, followed by strategic planning, and then leveraging partnerships. Those are the top three. And you can see training for staff and data and resource analysis are there, but not to the same extent. Okay, thank you for those results. And this brings us to our last question and to our panelists. And we'll start with Mihaela. How do you measure success, and what tools are you using to demonstrate and sustain success?
Well, aside from the traditional and expected methods such as reports, updates, memos, and all of the things that we've gotten really good at doing, highlighting what we've achieved as a unit, et cetera, et cetera. For me, I can think of maybe two measures of success. One is to see how members of our teams have thrived over time, whether it's new professionals or graduate assistants who have gone and have done fantastic things after leaving the office, and also to see how individuals have grown and become experts and leaders in their own right. And also to see something that Paula mentioned earlier is to really see projects that you've invested in long term, to see them succeed, that they've made a difference, that they're sustainable, and they really have had a good impact, both perhaps in terms of ROI, but also in terms of the mission of our business really is global learning and international education, and to see that that's actually really happening sustainably over time is really, I think, one of the tools to measure success.
Thank you. Ahmad.
In addition to the usual metrics, the easy to measure metrics, how many students do we have, how many students participated in study abroad, how much revenue we have from contract, whatever it is, those are easy. I mean, we have to do that for institutionally. I think that to Mihaela's point, for me, it has been how am I pushing, how are we pushing the ultimate strategic plan and implementing the strategic plan? What is our success there? We have global learning for all. So what are we doing to get us there? And so how many faculties are we reaching, and are we engaging in our activities? So a lot of kind of intangible work that's not gonna show results right away, or we're not gonna see the impact right away, but it is about a culture change, making people think about international education not as an add-on, but it's something that they think about every time their faculty is designing their course. Well, how can I add a interglobal component to my subject? And so those are the things that I worry about, and I hope I spend time in figuring out what do we do, how do we engage more people, not the usual suspects who always raise their hands, to participate in our activities. So we try to find other people to bring on, so also I'm intrigued also by how data was not received high. I think that's people didn't select it as a metric. I think that's important. We need to get to a point where we're using data to analyze our success and measure it, and base our decision on those, because that's going to help us also decide what we need to stop doing. Because a lot of things, especially, I mean, it's very appealing to do this new project or to go to this new country, but if there's really no data to support it, or you try it once and it didn't work, so let's not keep investing in the same thing expecting a different result. Let's move on to something different, and that we know will pay dividends.
Absolutely. Elena, can you respond, and whether you're talking about the use of data or otherwise, how do you measure success?
In two ways. At the end of the day, to maintain our jobs, we do have to eventually report out or give an account of the time we spent. And I like to, it's both a good practice as well as an affirmation. I just make lists. I make lists at the beginning, at the end of the day. I may not be able to check off the list, but it gets that anxiety and concern out of my head so that I can leave the rest of the neurons to really focus on creativity and to make those connections and for my memory. But this may seem like comical, but in all honesty, I measure success in hours of sleep that I get. So if I'm able to complete a goal and be smiling and others are smiling around me, it's because I was able to complete that goal with sufficient balance in my life. If I complete a goal or check all the boxes on my list, and you guys are calling, a medevac for me to get medical attention, I don't think that that's not a win. That's not successful. And I had to learn, going back to our comment on a question about burnout. Burnout is real, and it could even lead to compassion fatigue, where you're just so drained, you don't care anymore. And that's when we lose. That's when we have lost, when you lose your vision, your passion, and your desire to even move on. That is beyond the point of where we need to be. So to be successful, going back to that, self-care message, we have to really be conscious and intentional about ourselves and be self-aware as to what we do to push ourselves to the point. And even if you're not self-aware, trust those around you to alert you to that and listen to them. But if you are very successful and everyone around you hate you, that's not, what we do as international educators. We're in a peacekeeping business, as Paulo said. So if we have started conflict as a result of our work, we have worked against our own passion and our own drive. So again, it's not about that accomplishment, about that pinnacle. Is really how we get there, and we can do it as really fulfilled and rested human beings.
And Paulo, would you like to comment?
Say I measure success mainly in two ways. One is to what extent people want to participate in the activities, programs, initiatives of your institution, of your office. How many do you have to engage, and how many come knocking on your door? How many faculty knock on your door because they want to teach in your study abroad programs, and how many students recruit other students by word of mouth, be it international students or students to, talking about study abroad. How many other staff around your institution want to be on your team and work with you? That is a measure of your success. It's people are listening and looking at what you're doing, and they want to be a part of it. And before you even try to convince them they should be a part of it, they want to. That, I think, would be a measure of a way that I measure the success of what my organization does. The other also important way of measuring it is financially. Do I run a financially sustainable organization? Because at the end of the day, nobody wants to be in a sinking ship. And so you want to ensure, to the extent of your ability, that you're running a financially sustainable organization that can take the programs that all those people want to participate in, take them for the last, for the next few years, few decades. That's something that's going to stay. It's not going to be Paulo's programs. It's, my organization's programs, and they will be able to stay on long after I leave.
I think that's an important thing that we all think about on a regular basis, is what is the legacy of the work that I leave behind, and what will continue if I'm not here. And that really is a measurement, perhaps, of the success of our daily work and our ongoing work. There are a few questions that have come in from the audience that really tap into some of the comments that you're making. And one of them is, what did it take for your institution to finally make internationalization a priority? Or is it always struggling for recognition? And Paulo, I'll start with you and then invite others who may want to comment on that to also share. But Paulo, why don't you start there?
Yes, that's a great question, by the way. I think one of the things I've seen that really makes a difference and has made a difference in a couple of institutions I've worked with is the people, the key people, and it could be one person, two people, the key people the institution listens to, that everyone at the institution they listen to the most. And these might be different people at different times. Might be the president, a university might be the president, might be the provost, might be a dean. The people, those people that other people most listen to, carry your message for you. It's really important. So if the message is being carried by people who have everyone's attention, and they're talking about internationalization, and they're talking about why internationalization is important, then that is what I've seen opens the door to an institutional change. Because if I'm talking about the things we do, well, that's my job. I mean, wouldn't it be strange if Paul wouldn't talk about how global education and internationalization is important? But if you have a provost or a president talking about it, then it's different. So most of the institution listens to carrying your message, can make a difference, has made a difference in some institutions I've worked with.
Would anyone else like to respond to that question?
I agree with Paulo. I think we need, this is an ongoing process. You cannot let out on that because you have a president that changes or a provost that changes, and you could be sprung up, or you could basically set aside. I mean, and so I think it's important to work at two levels. One is at the higher level, bottom up and top down. Bottom up is you work with faculty, you work with staff, you support them, you show them the value, you engage them with your activities, find ways to engage them with your activities. And the high level, you focus on the business aspect of why this is important, whether it is to support enrollment, to support student success, to support whatever values are going to be the hot buttons for the leaders at the institution. So it's really, this is where you have to keep your ears and eyes open to observing what's happening at the institution, what are the priorities of the institution, and translating how international education supports those efforts, and how you, as an international office program, international programs office, contribute to the university's vision and mission at every stage of its evolution.
Helena or Mihaela?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand your institution and what works at your institution, and then find, of course, those voices that everyone listens to. So at Florida Atlantic, we don't talk so much about internationalization, but we do talk about global footprint, global branding, global engagement, wanting to be a Tier 1 research institution, which implies that you have to have an international presence. Of course, international students do bring revenue, but there has to be, and I believe now that there is an understanding that you can't just bring them here. And, one of the things we've done when we started recruiting more international students was to use that to address other things that we saw problematic for our international students in general. And use that momentum to resolve some issues, maybe find some scholarships for international students, or give them priority in housing, or whatever it is that the systemic issue is for your institution. I would say in terms of people, one of our vice provosts who recently retired. I think she was instrumental. She personally had led programs abroad. She did not know everything about international education, but definitely understood that that's something that we have to do. And those things combined work at FAU. Other schools may have different ways of approaching the situation.
Elena.
Yeah, I'll follow up on my highlighting that it's critical to listen to the messaging that you hear from the leaders. They will tell you the barrier that you need to accomplish, and that way you can develop a multi-pronged strategy. So sometimes it's about cost containment, and so you still have to address how in the long run, or the return on investment that it is involved when you implement your programs and your exchanges. Sometimes it's about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and how internationalization and adapting the curriculum can really expand the impact of that. And then others, it's just a lack of understanding of the transformation of the ability to make connections through internationalization. And that's where you can partner with your providers or with other colleagues or throughout your network and share the stories of that transformation. So as being part of a provider, we work more with doing that storytelling and capturing the experiences of the students and being very intentional and empowering them to share the stories back on their campuses so that they can encourage future students to study abroad as well. But again, you have to work at various sides, but start with the cues given to you by your leader, especially when the leadership has recently shifted, because that kind of sets the tone with your messaging and whether or not some of the efforts you're making falls on deaf ears or not. So you want to be smart about it, but consistent at the same time. Don't give up, make adjustments wherever necessary.
I think that is very good collective wisdom from all of you. And I think it's really important that we understand the context that we're operating in different scenarios. And you're right, Elena, how to tell those stories to advocate for internationalization, whatever that may be called within your context. I want to conclude, and we're going to conclude kind of with two things. One is I'm incorporating the final Q&A from the audience into your concluding remarks. So if you could each kind of go around and offer some concluding remarks, but incorporate into that advice for the next generation of international educators. What do you have to say to somebody who's stepping into a role and perhaps following somebody who's been in that position for over 30 years? So why don't I start with Ahmad, and then we'll go around.
I am the eternal optimist. I think it is a very exciting time for us in international education, despite all the challenges, and it will be challenging, but it's still exciting. I think as higher ed is also being questioned and expected to deliver differently, I think there's a great opportunity to really make sure that we make the case for international education and build international education in whatever form and shape we are using. There are a lot of opportunity. There are a lot of tools at our disposal now that were not available before, so we need to use those and take advantage of them. Take advantage of the network. We are a big, small community, and everybody is generous with their time, their expertise, with sharing, with working together. So we need to take advantage of that. And for Riley's question, I think it's the person who has been there for 35 years, I'm sure has a great network. So take advantage of that network.
Mahila.
So advice for someone who is new in the field and is maybe filling in some big shoes or shoes that have been worn for a long time. I think there's also an opportunity to, when someone is in a place for a long time, and that includes us here, there's always an opportunity for someone new to come in and maybe bring in a different perspective, do things a little bit differently, and kind of make your own mark. So learn from what's there, but don't be afraid to shape it your own way. And as far as any other remarks, I am also an optimist. I think the only way to survive long term in this field is to be an optimist. And there will be times that will be tough, like we've had them and we'll have them in the future. But you have to play the long game. And if you're committed to being in this profession, then you have to look long term, not just how to climb over the next obstacle. And I think there's a lot of support. And also remember that the skills are transferable. So if ultimately you're looking to do something else, that's okay too. There are so many skills that we learn in this field that can be carried over in private, in other areas of higher education, and sometimes it's okay to take a different road than maybe come back to international education later on.
Paulo.
I would end with 3 reminders that cover some of the topics and the questions we're just talking about. The first reminder is that you should trust yourself, use your self-confidence and use ways of building up your self-confidence. For instance, through the mentoring programs, through the association programs we talked about earlier, use that to build your self-confidence and don't be afraid, like Mihaela said, to bring your own perspective into your organization. Second reminder is that, and that has to do with the comment that Elena made earlier that I really liked. International education is diversity. We are part of it. We shouldn't have to remind people we contribute to diversity. Global learning is equity, contributes to equity. Internationalization at home contributes to equity. And global education in general and the work that international offices do contributes to inclusion. So most of what we are, if not all, is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We contribute to that. Of course, we have to be a part of that and extend the ways we are a part of that. But we are already, to some extent, contributing to diversity in our institutions. And lastly, finished as with what I started. International education is a successful endeavor. If you look back at the last 70 years, sometimes we're in the middle of one tough year, very difficult 3 months or a week or even 3 years. But overall, this is, we're in a very successful type of activity, and we have to believe that we will continue to be so, and that in the long run, we will prevail, and that we will succeed as we have been.
Thank you, Paulo. And Elena, final remarks and words of advice.
I'll start with words of advice to Riley. Thank you for your question. I think it's something that is reflective. The question is reflective to a reality in our space. We are, many offices are shifting leadership. And what do you do when you have that longstanding partner? So I would reiterate what has been said by the esteemed members of the panel, in that you should trust yourself and continue to leverage that colleagues network and believe in the vision that you have set for yourself. In addition, I would offer a recommendation to just be honest and say that you're not that previous person. There may be different attitudes surrounding this transition, and I can kind of sense that in the question. So don't feel free to trust yourself, your heart, and to trust your community and ecosystem of support and be validated. You have earned that place, and you have something to provide as well, because our field is limitless. We definitely are professionals from various backgrounds that can all have our role in changing the world. So with that, whether our local challenge is a new position or a lack of position, we can do something to impact this field for the better. We are not in this for ourselves, but for the greater good. So for the others who are present, just know my lasting thought is that you matter, and what you do especially matters.
Thank you, Elena, and thank you all for your comments today. Those of you who are on the panel, thank you for sharing your thoughts and insights. And for those of you who logged in to join us today, we appreciate that you took the time to listen in. This event was recorded, and the recording will be available soon as a member benefit. Enjoy the rest of your day.